Another highly controversial but equally relevant political and economic ideology is fascism. Now, like many of the other four primary economic systems, like communism, socialism, and capitalism, there are some basic definitions and some governing principles that make fascism distinct from those ideologies. But the reason why fascism is a very intriguing and curious idea is because of the fact that it really is, in some ways, a combination of almost all of the other three ideas. And we're going to see that the more that we analyze it and the more that we discuss it. So, to understand it at its core, fascism, philosophically, is the idea that there is strong government control of a particular nation, of a particular state, in order to maximize, strengthen, and increase the most pure, great form of that particular nation. So, essentially, it is rooted in the idea that strong patriotism to the extent that the overarching culture, ideas, systems, history, institutions, and more that are unique to a particular nation should be highly prioritized, enforced, and maximized, and that the entire public interest should revolve around that ideal society for that particular ideal nation, group, or concept. So, to understand it, we're going to go to good old Town A. Now, in Town A, let's say that it enacts a fascist government. Now, what will end up happening is that the culture, ideas, individuals, beliefs, and economics, as well as, more importantly, industries of Town A that make Town A distinct and, in their view, superior to other towns will be strengthened. All government control and efforts will be pushed to maximize the ideal Town A, which is all of those unique qualities of Town A in their best form working together. So let's say that Town A is known for its philosophy, and let's say that it's also, when it comes to its industry, it's known for, because there's a plane right there, I'll just say, it's known for its airline industry, or its cork industry, or its steel industry. What a fascist government will do in Town A is it will make sure that all of those industries are the ones that are the most invested in, the most prioritized, and in some cases, the only ones. Because they wish to make sure that Town A is completely self-sufficient, that it focuses on building its economy as well as its socio-culture around all of the qualities that are unique, distinct, and potentially strengthen Town A as a whole. What fascist governments tend to do on a more general scale, so that looking at it from a more general perspective, is they will of course focus on all of the industries, elements, and ideas that are unique and relevant to that nation. So I think the best way to understand how fascism applies, besides the theoretical example, is really in reality through its history. So let's look at the most notorious fascist nation in world history, and that's Nazi Germany. Basically, Adolf Hitler, the leader of the Nazi Party, ran on a fascist platform in which he believed that he wanted to strengthen Germany and create the greater Germany, make sure the people living and contributing to the economy, political system, and society of Germany, as well as those reaping the benefits, were greater Germans, the best example of the pure, strong German. And that anyone who stood in their way, who is not German, did not represent the common interest of German culture and German society, and anyone who just in general stood in the way of furthering that objective should be cast aside. Now, what he did when he ascended to power in 1933 is he immediately began focusing on trying to grow and strengthen purely German economies. He basically illegalized and he exiled, let's say that, let's go with that better word. He exiled all foreign industries. So at that time in Germany, there had been a lot of American automobile manufacturers and steel manufacturers who were taking advantage of Germany's weak economic state to go and set up their factories there, charge lower wages, get more of a desperate consumer class, and basically run their factories in a foreign nation. Hitler believed that that was not the best thing for fascist and nationalist Germany because of the fact that it did not strengthen Germans as a whole and create the German economy. He wanted German cars produced by Germans in Germany. So he exiled all of the foreign companies and foreign industries in Germany, and he basically eliminated almost all major commerce with all non-fascist nations, all major trade with non-fascist nations, and he began to strengthen the economy and society based off of pure German principles. Therefore, he focused primarily on Germans' steel and mineral industries. He focused on trying to militarize Germany, and militarization is a very critical part of fascism that I'm going to get into in a second. He focused on its food, philosophy, and cultural history, and most prevalently, he wanted to bring Germany back to the grand old days when it was the strong Holy Roman Empire, when it was the strong League of German States, when it was the Prussian Empire. He wanted to bring the society to its best form in history, back to the ideal German state. Now, the reason why I want to make militarism a key is because when all this is said and done, fascists essentially believe that their nation, that their culture is the best, that they're strengthening it at the strongest capacity, that their people are the most committed and the most strong and courageous, and that they want to expand their capital. And they believe in militarizing the economy to make sure that not only are they strong within themselves as part of their philosophy, but also for some economic and strategic reasons. Because A, they have to make sure that they can get the industries they need. Because let's be realistic. Germany is only one segment, at least at the time when Nazi Germany was established, it was only one segment of Europe, of one continent. It didn't have every single resource and every single industry needed to survive. So how does it survive? What it does, in Hitler and fascists' view, is they have to expand to create this almost wiggle room to grow and gain more resources that will strengthen the greater Germany. That's why in 1935 and in 1936, and lastly in 1938 and 1939, Hitler engaged in a series of invasions in which he conquered militarily nearby nations. He conquered the Rhineland and the Alsace-Lorraine, which is a region of the German border that had historically belonged to Germany, but at the end of World War I had been given to France. He conquered that territory. He invaded the Sudetenland, which is a very northern, distinctly German part of Czechoslovakia. He invaded, or he created an alliance, but basically he invaded because he took all of their land. Austria, and then eventually he conquered the entire Czechoslovakia, and then he invaded Poland, most famously, because that's what prompted World War II. By doing this, he gained critical resources that were necessary for the survival of the German state if it were to be completely self-dependent. Because every nation needs basic resources, and not every nation has them. So oftentimes, countries, if not all the time, countries will have to trade with others to gain critical imports and export things that they are abundant in to gain more leverage in the international world. But because Hitler was focusing, and what fascists tend to focus on, is strengthening the greater society, they needed those resources within the borders of their nation, and they did so by invading and conquering nearby lands. Another reason why fascists tend to invade and conquer others is to strengthen their public image, to strengthen the image of greater of the greater nation, that our goal is to spread our glory and our prominence and our success to other countries around the world, even if they're not our ideal society. We expand our nation and we make sure that we bring our prosperity to the rest of the world. Now, one way in which culture is impacted by fascism, and particularly, we'll use the example of Nazi Germany, is the fact that there has to be, as I was mentioning, the greater nation's culture prioritized. But beyond just strengthening that, excuse me, that particular nation's culture and history, what they tend to do is argue that not only are theirs inferior to other nations' history and cultures, but other people who are a part of that nation who historically, even just genetically, do not identify with that greater German prosperity and mindset and culture have to be eliminated, or at least subverted. So in Nazi Germany, for example, the clearest example of that was Hitler's attempt to create the Aryan or master race, in which the pure German race of greater German society was not only the dominant and prioritized race, but really the only one, and that eventually all non-Aryans would be cleansed from Germany. And the earliest example of this was when Hitler began to, at first, segregate and then eventually discriminate against, but then, as we know, unfortunately, in history, commit mass genocide of, were the non-Aryan peoples. So that included, most notably, the Jewish faith and members of the Jewish community. That included people of ideologies and cultures such as communism and, let's say, a culture from another nation that was not distinct to Germany. That included homosexuals or people of other races, of other skin colors, like who were African, or in some cases Middle Eastern or Asian, who had been living there from the German colonies, and many other groups, many people of other religions, like in some cases Catholicism, some branches of Christianity, other religions other than the Lutheran or even Roman Catholic faith, basically any other group or culture or mindset that was not the idea of, that did not fit into the category of the greater, prosperous, ideal Germany, had to be eliminated in the ideas of Hitler. And he did so through his Final Solution program, in which he committed a torture and mass murder of millions. Numbers are unfortunately not exact, but we estimate around 10 to 11 million of these people who were not viewed as the strong, distinct Germans. So what this revolves around, to go on more of a lighter note, is really the philosophy of fascism and the idea that a culture has to be prioritized front and center, and that anyone who does not fit into the greater prosperity of a particular idea, ideology, or culture should be eliminated. Now, it's important to understand that having strong patriotism and a strong passion for one's place of origin, beliefs, or culture is not radical fascism or nationalism. Radical fascism involves the complete prioritization of those beliefs, not only above everything else, but the idea that those beliefs are not only superior to other people's beliefs, but that other people who have different beliefs should basically be cast aside in the name of the ideal fascist ideology, whatever concept they are wishing to bolster to the maximum end. So on that note, that is really the idea and the core of fascism, and I hope that it's clearer to understand what exactly it is, why it's relevant, and how it can be examined to understand how atrocities in history, or even some benefits, can be looked at from a different angle.